This is Tabletop Babble, and I'm Amber. Hello! Today on the show, I chatted with Rick Perry, the production designer and creative producer for the actual play show Dimension 20. We sat down on April 30th and talked a bit about his film industry background and how it led to designing sets for a TTRPG show, as well as some fun behind-the-scenes stories on how the Dimension 20 sets come into being. Hi, Rick, and welcome to Tabletop Babble. For my listeners, please, would you mind introducing yourself? Your name, well, we already know, I just said it, but whatever. Your pronouns, and what you do in the TTRPG space.
Howdy, thank you so much for having me on. My name's Rick Perry, and I am the production designer and creative producer for Dimension 20. My pronouns are he, him.
Well, I'm super excited to have you on. I was telling you a little bit before the show that when Brennan told me who made the sets, I was like, I gotta talk to this person, because it's one of the things I first noticed when seeing Dimension 20. It's like, oh my God, those are beautiful. Before we get into that, I always like asking people when they come on to the show, kind of like their background, their history in the TTRPG. So for you, what came first?
Yeah, well, so I come at it mostly from a film and television background, actually. I kind of started in fine arts, and then I've been working in film and TV for about 15 years, kind of doing a lot of different jobs, from set carpenter to painter to production designer. And so I also have always had an interest in tabletop games, and I had just recently gotten back into playing D&D maybe the year before, and was like running a campaign at home and stuff when I was actually working on a college humor sketch, and they pulled me over for this new show that they were talking about, and it was just kind of a good fit, and so came from there. But I did not grow up using minis for games that I played. Is definitely more theater of the mind background. So this show was like a deep, very deep dive into minis and terrain. But that's kind of the nature of the film business, anyways. Like whatever show you're working on, you sort of become an expert about shrimping or whatever it is that the movie or the thing is about. You sort of become this like kind of micro expert of that, and just kind of dive in.
Well, so you went to college, you said, for film stuff, and that's your background in school?
I studied drawing and painting. I'm from Central Texas, from like rural Texas, and I went to a state school there called North Texas and studied drawing and painting, and I lived move around New York and different places. And I got into film work, and gravitated towards the art department because of that kind of creative visual background. And yeah, just haven't looked back since then, I guess.
Well, then I'm going to probe your mind a little bit, because I want to go back a little and ask, like, what kinds of stuff would you do for films?
I started as a production assistant. I don't know how much you know about film and TV, but
assume I know zero.
Okay, cool. A production assistant, also known as a PA, is like the bottom tier of all the departments in film and television, and they're kind of like the gopher, like the person who like could be like making coffee or filling in stuff on a spreadsheet or making runs to the store for whatever things. They just sort of like the minions that make movies and things happen. And I gravitated towards the art department, because I had that background in visual arts, and I grew up kind of building stuff, and I wasn't afraid to like pick up a circular saw or whatever. And so I got into set building, and I eventually moved back to Texas from New York, and joined the union and as a carpenter. And I worked on some big shows like Prison Break and the Friday the 13th remake in Austin. Just worked on just building these massive sets, and got to see how big movies are made, which was really fun. And then I just kind of jumped around. I did like greensman work, which is like it's kind of like a movie landscaper. I did scenic work, which could be anything from painting walls a certain shade to like doing like faux marble or whatever kind of paint treatments. And and I just sort of got more and more interested in how things are made, and and the design part of it, and to kind of climb the ladder over time. And actually, I went back to school. I went to grad school at UCLA for directing and learned a lot more about storytelling and kind of how everything comes together. And yeah, I don't know. I forgot what you were asking exactly.
No, I wanted to know like the types of things that you were working on in the film stuff. So what was like, was there something specifically in your experience doing that you were more drawn to, or were you more of like, I just love doing all of this and I like the variety?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a really curious person. So I definitely liked kind of I like the deep knowledge around things, you know, and like learning the tricks and the ways to make something cool. And I love collaborating. I love kind of just jamming with people. And I think the best way to do that is, you know, you have to kind of get a little bit good at whatever it is you're doing, to have a kind of literacy where you can bounce with someone else. And so I don't know. Yeah, I guess I've kind of, just kept picking up things until I got to the point where it's like now all the different tools are in my toolbox and I can, you know, bring them all to bear or whatever.
Going from, because now of course I'm talking about these like massive sets and doing like landscaping and things, to go from something like so big scale down to now doing miniatures and things. I kind of want to know how you went from that to getting onto Dimension 20. What was like the show trail that you followed that ended up leading you to this TTRPG show?
Well, I just post grad school, I was doing a lot of production design, and one of my classmates actually was the producer on the first season of Dimension 20, Lucretia Stinnett. And just prior to that, she'd been producing a lot of sketches for them, and she brought me in to do a couple sketches that one summer. And then, you know, she knew that I was like into D&D and stuff, and that she was doing the show, and I went and met with Brennan and David Kearns and a few people there. And I think initially, what was really cool, I mean, Dimension 20 has been like one of the most gratifying films or TV projects that I've ever worked on, because they've been so collaborative along the way. And I got to be involved really early on and sort of contribute and see the whole journey. And it still continues to be that way. I mean, I think they try really hard to be innovative and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I initially was brought on to build a set for them. You know, we were trying to figure out, what is this set? It's going to be this show called Fantasy High. It was before Dimension 20 was even the name of the show. It was just the Fantasy High thing. And so we were trying to figure out, let's build a fantasy high school that we can put them in, you know, and we're going to need a table, you know, and I was like, this sounds a really fun design challenge, is to like build a table in a 360-degree shooting environment. And, you know, and it just kind of grew from there. And then we started talking about miniatures and terrain as we were going in that process. And then as we were, you know, building things, it just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger. And we were like, you know, we could do this, but we need a little more money and we need a little more time. And they were like, yeah, let's do it, you know, so.
That's so fun. So I also am a fan of deep dive knowledge. Like, I love watching shows like How It's Made, and just love seeing behind the scenes stuff, obviously. And I kind of want to know, like, I want to know that process. Like, what is it like to be a production designer for a show like Dimension 20? Like, what are the steps? How does it happen from high up to down tiny? I would love to hear a lot about that.
I kind of handle everything on the art side, from the sets, the physical sets, you know, that have the plexiglass and LEDs and all that stuff, to the table, which is the more conventional kind of production design stuff, where I use SketchUp a lot and like lay stuff out kind of in a 3D environment. And then we'll hire carpenters or work with people to build those elements and make sure they're finished out. The interesting thing about this is I also get to work with Brennan and some other people too, like David Kearns and just whoever's kind of part of that season, to kind of beat out what the battles are going to be, because we have to build the things way in advance. And there's always a lot of concerns about how they play out at the table, and just sort of the worlds are always these crazy mashup worlds, like Candyland and Game of Thrones or whatever, where so it's like this. Every season becomes its kind of own little mini research project in a way, because you get to do all this world building, but you have to really like get granular, and ask questions that you like, well, what do the candy people eat? Can they eat themselves? Because I have to actually put the food on the table. So what do I paint the food? Like these are, these kind of questions come up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're making candy people houses and they have candy people tables, you're gonna have to know what to put on there. That's awesome. I love that stuff. Okay, cool.
We've kind of evolved our process a little bit, and I think it's been over 3 years now of working the show, which is really exciting and awesome that it's just still going and people are into it and stuff. But so our process has evolved, and we've gotten a little better, I think, at it, and more efficient. And now we, usually when it's not COVID times, we have a big giant whiteboard, and grid it out. And it's like, okay, we know we're going to have 8 battles this season. So we put 8 big squares on there, and then there's probably a bunch of ideas that people already have. Brennan usually has, a handful of ideas already. It's like, oh, there's definitely this battle and there's definitely this battle. And so we'll start to throw stuff on there and kind of try to flesh it out. And we do that in sessions, a couple hour sessions over the course of a week or two. And it's because it's actually a lot of material to generate ahead of time, especially, in a game that is essentially an improvisation game. I think one of the great things that Brennan does is really incorporates the character creation in the arc generation of the world, so I think, like any good campaign, like the stuff that he's creating and the battles that we're making should be challenges and answers to the personal quests of the player characters. They should service those things in some way or another. So we're trying to do all this stuff in advance, and and we move stuff around, and then from there it's a lot of research, a lot of kind of brute force, seeing like what miniatures are available and how we might make this, and what should these color palettes be, and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of back and forth too. It's like, oh, I couldn't actually get this element burning, but what about, look at this element, this looks really cool, and couldn't we just change this thing to be this or whatever, and then it kind of all comes together at the last possible minute. I work with a bunch of really talented people who model makers. Pretty much everybody in the shop is both a professional, like, film and television model maker, who have worked on like Interstellar or whatever, like really big movies, but they also play D&D or play tabletop games. So that's great for us. And they contribute a lot as well as we go through the process, and we pull it all together at the end.
I was going to ask, how big is your team? If you're as a production designer, how many people do you have working with you to make these sets come to life?
It scales kind of depending on the season, and it's changed over time, but usually I have like 1 or 2 people that are painting the miniatures and probably doing a lot of kit bashing and that are just focused on that side of it. And then usually a couple of people at least that are helping on the terrain and stuff. I'm in the shop with them, kind of leading the way and picking up slack, and then we'll sometimes have an art coordinator who helps with all the budgeting and just keeping track of all the details of everything. And then on the day when we're shooting, usually we have an on-set model maker who will do like the last touches or add something or tweak something based on like what's happening. We're listening to the show while it's being taped, and we're in like a little secret room with the sets, and I can hear like, oh, did you hear that they just named that turtle? We have to get a turtle or whatever, and trying to like, do what we can to sort of just continue to like put love and stuff into the sets, and then we put it out there. And then actually they come afterwards, the director, Michael Schawbach, and his team and our on-set model maker come back after the whole season is done and shoot the close-ups that you see, the little beautiful tracking shots with lighting and everything of all the miniatures and stuff. So
I'm laughing because I just love imagining like 4 or 5 people sitting in a dark room listening to a show and be like, oh no, we gotta change this, we gotta change that. They just added something because, like you said, D&D is such a highly improvisational show, there's only so much that Brennan can really truly plan out when you put 5 or 6 people around a table and they decide that they're attached to like a turtle. And they want a turtle. You got to make a turtle. Well, actually, while you were talking, this is a good transition. You said the word kit bashing. Mm-hmm. Now, again, pretending that I have zero knowledge of anything, what is kit bashing?
As far as I understand it, it's combining, more than one different miniature or piece of terrain together to make something different. So let's say you have a famous example I've used in the past is a skater dwarf was called for in the first season of Fantasy High, and so I look around online and as you might guess, there are no skater dwarf minis that you can buy from any vendor. There's definitely skaters and there's definitely dwarves. So you can take those two kits, those two miniatures, and chop them up and put them back together how you want. And that's kit bashing in a nutshell.
So how much of the stuff that is in Dimension 20 that you make does come from existing models and stuff that are out there, and how much of it is purely you guys have made it somehow?
It's hard to say. I will use an off-the-shelf mini wherever possible because it just saves time and money. And that being said, because the show is this kind of mashup thing, it's not very often that we get a lot of off-the-shelf miniatures that will fit the bill. So, so when we do, they usually come from Reaper Miniatures was a great company, or we do a lot of stuff from Hero Forge, because their library just continues to grow, and we work with a guy in LA that can print them real fast for us. But we kind of do whatever gets the job done, whether it's we've sculpted things from scratch, or and you kind of, I guess that's a skill I've developed, is having this list. Okay, I got to find these skater dwarves, and then I'm able to look at miniatures and be like, well, I think that head would probably be easy to cut off, and buy things knowing which pieces we're going to use, essentially.
Sure. What's the maybe strangest combination, if you can remember? I'm making you think. I'm sure you've made so many things that it's probably hard to I think Skater Dwarfs is probably the most perfect.
This is a really odd thing that I had never actually talked about this before, but in the Unsleeping City, the first season of Unsleeping City, which is a D&D game set in a magical New York, there's a battle that is in a theater. It's there's the audience and there's a stage and there's an actual show that's happening, and the PCs have to be involved, and it's definitely an unconventional D&D battle. But anyways, we're building the facade for that theater. I was grabbing stuff from the dollar store and the hobby stores to just kind of cobble together a little bas relief style tableau that would be carved out of wood above the stage. And one of the things that I grabbed was these little rubber babies, and I didn't need the whole baby, so I had to cut them in half with a utility knife, and they were made out of this rubber, and they had this kind of little wiggle, and it was just really graphic as I was dismembering these little rubber babies to use their pieces for the theater facade.
As you think back to your younger self, and you're could you ever imagine that your day job is going to be cutting up a bunch of rubber babies?
No, didn't imagine that.
Oh my gosh. I'm assuming then the player characters, the people who are playing their characters, get their own models for their fit minis?
Yes. Yeah, we usually, it's Hero Forge is.
That's what I was going to say. Do you have somebody who then crafts, do you have a Hero Forge person who goes in and makes the minis for everybody?
Usually, Brennan actually cranks out a lot of them. I mean, Hero Forge is really easy to use, and so it's also kind of a shorthand for us as well, where I'm okay, hey, I need to know who this leader of this faction is. You've been delaying days. I need to know who this person is because I need to make them. And then he'll just send me a Hero Forge, and he's this is them. I'm okay. And then we'll kind of go back and forth and tweak them a little bit and print them out. And then, depending on how kind of unique it is, we probably will do some kind of kit bashing or just adding some detail or something that we couldn't get that we needed to wanted to have one there for the player's sake. So the player's miniatures get a lot more attention and time put into both the paint job and just kind of figuring out what they are and how they're going to look.
Does the thought of leading a group through the creative landscapes of your imagination terrify you? Do you worry about being asked questions you don't know the answers to? Have you wanted to try being a dungeon or game master, but your social anxiety has been holding you back? Hi, I'm Amber, and I used to nearly vomit at the idea of running a tabletop RPG. How'd I get over that anxiety? I haven't. Surprise! I'm still an anxious mess, and you can listen to all of it on Shapeshift, where I've recorded 80% of every game I've ever ran. Over the last 4 years, I've run a ton of indie one-shots like Casketland, a weird Western horror game, to my first ever campaign using Ryutama, a Studio Ghibli-like exploration-focused game. Follow me through my journey learning how to GM and to live with my anxiety. It doesn't go away completely, but it does get easier to manage. Go to geekspective.com to find out more information or find Shapeshift on wherever you listen to your podcasts. So for people who aren't familiar with Dimension 20, how many seasons are there and how many of them have you worked on? Like how many sets have you done?
I might have to look the answer up. There's been a lot of seasons. I think that also I've worked on stuff that hasn't come out yet either. But we've done a full season of Fantasy High, which was like 20 episodes, 18 episodes. We did a full season of Unsleeping City, a second season of Unsleeping City. There's been a few short seasons. I think I've worked on every season except there was a live season of Dimension 20 Fantasy High and the Pirates of Leviathan season they did recently live, or not live, but over like Zoom and with Roll20. I didn't do that one, but all the rest I've been involved in. Any of the ones that have big set things or elements of some kind, whether digital or physical. As
you're coming into this new way of doing things, miniatures on a TTRPG show, and you're coming up with ways, developing the process really, right? How have you innovated each season? What has been for the first time you worked on something, a problem you ran across that you were able to innovate that helped you in the next season?
Absolutely. Yeah. From the first season to Crown of Candy, I think we've come a massive way in distance in just quality and just knowing tricks. And also, we work with a 24-inch by 36-inch board. And so that's kind of limiting, but also it gives us it's a kind of design challenge kind of box that we can work within. And so we're always trying to find ways to utilize vertical space or negative space, or, we've done things where we had a sewer battle where the PCs were locked in this New York City sewer and the water was rising every round. So we had pieces of plexiglass that would drop in to escalate it. Yeah, I don't know. We're just kind of always trying to push the envelope and do something we haven't done before, or build on something that we have done. For
you personally, what has been your favorite set to work on?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think the stuff more recent, probably one of the things that we also do is these elaborate dungeon master screens that have kind of a tableau of the whole world in them, and it's a really interesting challenge because we try to kind of represent a snapshot of the whole campaign, which hasn't been filmed yet and hasn't completely been fleshed out. And maybe the places that they're going to go and things that were going to happen in some way, but without also giving anything away to the players who are going to be staring at it for hours and hours on end. So that's a really interesting kind of sculptural thing that gets to be made. And the one for the Crown of Candy, one was really interesting because I represented the different food nations on there. Like there's the candy people and the dairy people and the meat people and the breads, the grain people and the vegetables people and the fruit people. And the whole thing was made out of pieces of food that we cast, made these big plaster cast things and got to make these little teeny tiny towns. And so, I don't know, it was really fun to just kind of sculpt that all together and paint it. And I got to that was kind of a big solo project that I got to work on that season, which was really fun.
Because it's one of those things where I love miniatures in general. Like, doll houses are amazing to me. I follow all these ridiculous mini things on Instagram, and I'm not sure I would ever be able to craft that kind of stuff, but I'm so fascinated about the process. Like, how do you make a tiny thing? And you just said that you cast real food. How do mini happen? Rick, I don't know. Like, what tools, how would you even go about making, like, I don't know, a miniature? I think I saw on your Twitter a miniature beer pong table. Like, what? What? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, kind of the answer has been for us is like whatever gets the job done, whatever's the path of least resistance. But there's some kits that you can buy, a lot of things people have already done. And, I never don't use a good kit if you can find one that does what you want, whether it's a miniature or a piece of terrain. Of course, kit bashing, so you can look at a kit and combine it. A lot of things are kind of the old school method of sculpting miniatures is using this 2-part epoxy that's called green stuff. It's like a blue and yellow thing you mix together, and it's like it gives you a couple hours to work with it. And so you have little metal and silicone tip tools, and you just sculpt a little miniature essentially. And you can use stuff like wire or other elements to make it easier. And then now, I mean, most things are made in a computer, 3D, and then printed. So for that example of the beer pong table, which was for a Battle from Fantasy High, we wanted some beer pong tables, and I hollered at our friend Adam, who does the prints for us. I was like, "Can you just make a beer pong table? Can you just? It seems pretty simple, like put some." And he sculpted it in a computer and printed it out, and then we painted it. So.
Have you been, do you also use 3D modeling tools yourself?
I haven't done any 3D modeling. I use SketchUp to lay stuff out, whether it's like big sets or sometimes if I'm trying to spatially look at a small set, you can use SketchUp to do that. Or sometimes I just did for an upcoming season of Dimension 20, I just did with like oil-based clay, like a little sculpture to try and figure out something. And sometimes I'll kind of pick out the kits that we're going to use and wait for them to come in and then kind of build them part of the way enough to where I can visualize it and sort of move them around in space to see how it's going to play out before we settle on the final design.
Between each season that you've done with Dimension 20, how much of it gets reused?
Not too much. It's so specific. We have like a couple of boxes of like arms and legs and bits and things that we didn't use that gets reused, and some paint and stuff like that. But really, usually the things are so specific that we're kind of going out on a limb each time. And then also, we just in general, film production is always kind of like it tries to be very efficient. So we try not to have a lot of waste or get things that we're not going to end up using.
When a season is over, where do all the sets go? Where do all the minis and them live or not live?
Yeah, well, we create them up and pack them up carefully and inventory it, and then they go into a unit of holding somewhere, a storage unit of holding, and we just keep them. And I think one time we took some sets to C2E2 a few years ago and had like a demo, which was pretty cool. And I'm trying to think if we've recycled anything else. I think mostly they're just kind of in storage, and then if we come back to a season, maybe we'll be able to utilize some of them, some of the same sets. But I mean, we're not trying to repeat anything either, you know. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of like a thing in film where when you have an asset like that, you just keep it because it could come in useful later on.
Yeah, I was asking that because I think I was watching something about how somewhere they kept like cuts of film in some storage and it was lost or whatever. And I am like, there's got to be props and sets. Where do they go? Where do they live? So you don't get to take, per se, maybe a mini that you loved and crafted and keep it at your desk or anything. It all just gets inventoried together.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I mean, I guess I probably could, but you know, it's all together and you know, safely tucked away. There are massive, massive warehouses outside of Los Angeles with like the sets from Iron Man 1 and whatever. Like many of those things are just stored for years and years, and then they'll get auctioned off. And maybe someone will reuse them, or they'll just destroy them sometimes.
I've thought about that before, and it's like the amount of storage that is in the United States that is just of things that were used maybe once or twice and then just kept. It's kind of like when the apocalypse happens. All these warehouses will get to go and get all Iron Man suit to wear.
Yeah, that would be a really weird moment in the apocalypse.
Somebody breaks into a warehouse. It's like, what? Sweet, yes. Maybe trade that for some water or something more important.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, you know, going from doing bigger size like movie sets to this, what have been the challenges for you in like your creative process or just getting used to something?
Well, you know, being this kind of digital show, on one hand, I mean, we probably have a lot more resources than a lot of actual play shows, but compared to like a kind of a regular TV show or a bigger show, it's pretty tight and scrappy, you know, and so just doing a lot of the jobs that normally you would have other people around to do, or who are more specialists, I guess. So kind of being a jack of all trades is really helpful.
Doing this kind of work for your work, right? Have you been doing mini stuff for fun for yourself?
Not as much as you might imagine. I'm pretty busy with work, and we have two small children, which keeps me busy as well. So you know, my home games, which I run a couple, are not as you might have think, not as as fancy as the Dimension 20 sets, but you know, I usually use terrain and minis and stuff and just kind of mock it up. Well, I have been trying to find more time actually in the last year to just do stuff that's fun with miniatures and terrain for myself, as like a way to like breathe creatively and to interact with the things that are what I work on professionally, but in a way that is just sheerly about joy, and it's just for me, you know, just to give me some juice and refresh, you know. So have been doing more stuff just for funsies.
That's good. I think as hobby people who tend to make hobbies our day job, and then it's like, wait, I need to actually spend time with that hobby in a way that's refreshing.
Yeah.
It's super important. Super important. Because like I do so much for your podcasting and actual plays and stuff, and it's like I always make sure to have one game that is no content. This is not recorded. This is not being put out anywhere. This is just for me. Super important.
Yeah.
So you already love doing this stuff, or you really already enjoyed doing this stuff in the film world, being able to do all those cool different things on sets in the art department. But for here, what about this do you specifically like love now?
That's a very good question. Just that, in that it is kind of scrappy like that, I get to do design and build. Whereas normally, you know, the designer is not the one in the shop building the stuff. But I really like doing that stuff, and I I like it that way. So the show provides me that opportunity to be able to kind of have my hand in the thing throughout the process, to the point that I like to leave some of the design decisions open until get in there and actually start touching the material and seeing how things are coming together, so that there's a bit of that kind of living improvisation throughout the creative process. This is how I like to work. So
I'm glad you found that. That's awesome.
yeah, thank you.
So do you see yourself doing this for a long time, like mini production? It's something that you really have found enjoyment and fulfilling?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. Brennan is great. College Humor is great. The show is really collaborative. It's hard for me to imagine it's just not common for a production designer to be so involved in the like creative process of what the season is going to be. And I'm really grateful for that. Just the show kind of has an audience, and it's so nice to make something and know that people watch it and are into it and think what you made is cool. And, like that is a great feeling. I love tabletop gaming, and I spend a lot of time gaming, and so I'm happy to be working on a show. And also, like, this community, is so incredible, and it feels so humbling to be part of such a really amazing, like, just thing that is happening right now in our culture or whatever. Just to be able to contribute a tiny bit and just be a little tiny part of that dialogue is really awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's been nice. I've needed the TTRPG community the last year. Very much so. So Rick, it's been lovely chatting with you. If people wanted to find you online or your work, how can they do that?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure. You can find me on Twitter at Richard H. Perry, and I'm also on Instagram if you want to see pictures of me growing cabbage and doing things around my homestead, also at Richard H. Perry.
Awesome, great. And of course, everybody check out Dimension 20 so you can see Rick's beautiful sets. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. You can find me on Twitter at Rocket Orca, Kenny as at Wolfmere, and John is at Crossways GM. Tabletop Babble is part of the Geekspective Network. Go to geekspective.com to check out all our other shows or follow us on Twitter at Geekspective. Our theme music was provided by the Battle Bards.